Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Moto Monday and our whole new schedule. I'm super excited to get into this with you guys this week, and hopefully you guys take some things away from this quick spiel I have on what's going on in the military and around the globe, at least in the terms of defense. And we'll touch on a couple of things that are, I guess, a loosely connected defense, but I still think they're prevalent. So we will touch on those as well. So with that said, let's kind of dive into today's Moto Monday topics, which we're going to cover a pretty big span of things. So I think it'll be fun. So first off, I thought super interesting was this. So this is a company called Inflatable, and they're actually out of the Czech Republic, and they produce these. So this is basically an inflatable dummy of the U.S. HIMARS system, which I think is pretty rad. They won't mention on whether or not they're being used in the war against Russia and Ukraine right now, but I've got a pretty good suspicion that they are, considering their sales are up like 30% over the last year. So I think, again, it's super interesting. If you want to look them up, again, it's Inflatech. Their CEO is Wojtek Fresser, and you can punish me if I had mispronounced it, but Wojtek Fresser, I think, is his name. But they've been around for a bit, right? And they plan on doing, but they're already talking about how they expect to grow over the next 3 to 5 years by double figures. So yeah, they're just a super. Again, this stuff's just super cool. Especially when you consider like jets are, they may not really be able to distinguish. Helicopters being a little bit lower might be able to, but especially at like first glance, if you've got all the right like markings and other things, like this could be a really serious deterrent, or force a lot of like extra flybys to ensure that they're like using missiles on targets that are real. That's a pretty cool idea. It's a pretty cool invention. I'm curious just how much those cost, because I think I'm about to have one in my backyard, just for shits and giggles. Right, the thing's fucking cool. Like, who needs a bouncy toy when you have fucking a bouncy HIMARS? Again, super cool. The overall weight of it's only 100 kilograms, which I guess is heavy, but it's not that heavy, just considering everything. But yeah, I think actually I was reading somewhere that these actually are pretty expensive. I don't know that I'll actually be owning one. It was said more in jest. I think the HIMARS version, they can cost up to like $100,000, which I think it's just because they're made pretty ruggedly. Like, you could put these out in the field and inflate them, and then they're there for like a minute. Like, they're extremely well made, according to at least the things I've been reading about with them. But again, if you want to check them out, the company's called Inflatech. They're out of the Czech Republic. They sell about 50 of these decoys a month to all sorts of different NATO members. So go check them out. If you can find your way into one, let me know. I would love to come bounce around on it. And yeah. So with that said, we will move on to the next topic. But I just want to show you guys this because I thought it was super interesting that someone thought to do this. So yeah. Next big ticket item. So this article, the overclassification, overkill, basically it's talking about how the U.S. government right now is just kind of swamped in this overproduction and like overclassification. Like, everything is secret or top secret. And with that said, they have like, I think it's over 50 million threats every year that get annually classified as confidential, secret or top secret. And so with that said, there's over like 2,000 workers that are processing all of these millions and millions and tens of millions of classified documents. And then there's over like 4.2 million employees that have access to all of these documents. And so, it makes sense more so to me also that like we don't need that many classified documents. And if we do have that many classified documents, like, what the fuck all is going on inside of our system that like there's that much information that people can't know, right? Like there's we have the National Freedom of Information Coalition, who are great about trying to get us information on things, especially as things become declassified. But I think there's also needs to be something. There also needs to be some us writing into law or some sort of like provision or something that basically states like, yeah, you can have like a top secret document, but it only gets to be top secret for X amount of time. Like when you have a document, it's like, oh, well, this is sealed for 50 years. It's like, dude, that's a generation. That's a fucking like that's a lifetime. You know what I mean? Like by the time that shit comes out, shit's already gone so far south or so far the other way that like you can't even actually fix the issue that could have been fixed had people just known about the issue, right? Also, the more brains on something to find a problem, the better. And again, the government, I think, is kind of over abusing with this power and overreaching with this power, just saying like, oh, well, like we're just gonna call it classified and make it top secret or secret, and you know what I mean, like, and it's being used just frivolously or to hide things from the American people. Now, there's a difference between like OPSEC type stuff, which I think is necessary, and just keeping things from the American people. Also, uh, if that OPSEC is against the American people, right? If the actions that are being taken that are being covered up are actually like unconstitutional or are going against going against U.S. citizens, like that's a big problem, right? So I think that this article goes a bit more into kind of like again like the security risks of having so much classified information and only having X amount of workers to work on it and like ensure that it stays safe, and then having like millions of people that have access to it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where we just have to get a better grasp on what we allow to be classified, and it should have to like meet certain requirements, you know. But even then, even with that said, honestly, like I feel like unless the mission's currently going on, you know what I mean, then I feel like I'm not sure there's really a need to keep things classified. I mean, maybe down the road. I mean, certain things obviously we're gonna have, yes, but like there's just so many things that I think should be declassified. You know what I mean? Like I think that the government shouldn't have the ability to classify as much things as they do because it's the people that get screwed in the end. You know what I mean? It's the people that are sitting here waiting or wondering, and we deserve to know. And like this whole concept of like, oh, like, potentially the civilian populace couldn't handle the truth of whatever. It's like, dude, you got it. I feel like at this point, we just got to take the Band-Aid, rip it off, and move on. You know what I mean? Like some feelings might be hurt along the way. Some people, might not take it all that great. But the sooner we just make this a giant shift in just in having a more transparent government, the better for everybody. You know what I mean? Like, so take that for what it's worth. That's my 2 cents on that subject. So this was again another article that came out this last week. So this one, this is talking about China and their increase in spending for this year. It wasn't a massive increase. They went from 7.2% in the coming year from a 7.1%, but they made a very clear statement about it that it was going towards like troop welfare, and they've got a 2 million man standing army now, and again, their budget is nowhere near the U.S.'s budget. It's still like a quarter of our budget, but they're already saying that they want to take Taiwan by 2027. I think that it's very possible that you might see it happen much much faster than that. There's a good chance that like because China's like there's like this shift happening in China where like their military is kind of like taking their military operational guidelines are kind of like overriding their government, right? And so like we saw the same thing happen with Japan in like the 1930s, and we saw how devastating that was for Eastern Asia. But we will kind of really see what how this all comes to pass with China. You know what I mean? Like, and we're looking at potentially them providing things to Moscow. And I thought it was interesting because supposedly we had U.S. officials telling Xi Jinping and China that there would be serious consequences if they assisted Moscow in this war against Ukraine. It's like, first of all, this administration is not doing jack shit like that. Like, they can say whatever they want, but like, that shit ain't happening under this administration. They've already proven that they're weak on the subject. And number two, even if they did, like, what are we really gonna do? I mean, like, unless we're actually gonna follow in the footsteps of like maybe some other administrations who've been more strict on China, which again, I just don't see this administration being strict on China. Like, they haven't been strict on China. They completely reversed how strict we were being to just kind of giving back everything. So like, and yeah, I don't see how, what serious consequences our government officials are talking about that they're gonna uphold over China, unless we actually like stop buying from China and impose major tariffs and, you know, just say like F you to the debt. You know what I mean? Like, just stop paying, but like whatever. Like I don't see what Director Burns really is gonna do about it. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things that I think it's interesting. It's an interesting talking point because like we have this massive war in Ukraine, you know, and China and obviously Russia is there and doing their invading thing. Russia and China have already talked about how they're buddying up and gonna be a new world economic power. So we'll see kind of where China puts some of their efforts. Now, China also has been. It's almost like we've been in a Cold War in space, and China's the only one that's fucking clued in. But I mean, like, they've been dumping tons of money into their space program stuff. They're building research facilities all over the globe that once they're all stood up, right? They've got some in the Arctic, some in the Antarctic, and all over, honestly, all over the globe that they've been putting up as, again, research facilities. But with those research facilities, they'll be able to more closely and more accurately track our satellites, and they already have the technology to shoot them down. Their issue was being able to like accurately track them, but now with all these new research facilities, they'll be able to do that basically. So, you know, there's a good chance that, you know, that something major happens with China here, you know, and not too far in the future. So it's something to consider. It's something to keep watching, keep taking notes on, and kind of see where the country gets guided. You know, it's gonna be a wild rest of this year, and you best believe 2024 is probably gonna be a super crazy year also for the United States and the world. Honestly, like, there's tons of just huge things happening. So, with that said, we're going to get into the last topic really quick. And we've already kind of touched on this once this year at the beginning of the year because it was huge. I just think it's funny that they've gone back to their old motto, which is you know, be all you can be, which I think is fun. I think is funny because you have had the military really kind of take this step into wokeness, if you will. You know what I mean? Like, they've tried to be like more inclusive and like, oh, this is okay and this is okay and that's okay, and we're gonna lower the standards here to make room for these people, and we want everyone just to feel like they belong, and all this fucking, honestly, just this super soft nonsense, you know. And so you saw at the beginning of this last year, they were short, I think, almost 20,000 recruits because they actually, I think they were short 15,000, so from 60,000. But I was seeing another report that said that they were actually short the full 20,000 down to 40,000. But even if it was 45,000, right? Like, they're still short 15 to 20,000 recruits from last year, and they set a new target for 65,000. So they increased it by 5,000 coming through 2023, and I have no fucking clue how they plan on doing that. Like, just because they said they're going back to their old motto, "Be all you can be," to go after and target the Gen Z generation, but like but they also came back at it with like that like softer, like, oh, like being in the military, like you can, like, again, they just changed all these standards, and they are allowing for all this just nonsense and wokeness to come in and to drive the military, and that's why people left. Like, that's why they can't. That's why the retention numbers are low too. It's not just recruiting; it's also retention. People don't want to be in a woke ass military, in a weak ass military. They don't want to be in a military whose commercials are just soft and woke as shit. You know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to be part of a military. Like, when you think of the military, right? You think of like people out there doing hard training, becoming hard individuals, becoming extremely trained, and in some cases, if you're infantry or combat related MOSs, then you're becoming like a lethal individual. You know what I mean? Or and again, an extremely trained individual, whether it be drone piloting or whatever it is, right? But you're going into the military, and you're gonna work a hard job, and you want the people to your left and right to be responsible. You want them to be honorable. You want them to be someone you can count on, who's reliable, who is smart. Dropping the IQ standards was a huge. It's going to be a huge problem. They dropped the PT standards. They dropped the IQ standards, and they raised the the maximum age limit. So I think in the Navy it's 36 now, and like I think the Air Force and somewhere, I can't remember which one. One went up to 42, and I was just like, holy shit, man! Like, could you imagine? And I don't know if it was the Army or not, but could you imagine? Like, and maybe it's MOS related, but I don't think it is. I think it's general. So it's like, could you imagine like looking to your left and right and being like, man, like these guys are already like not in good shape, right? And I think they dropped the ASVAB score to a minimum from 32 or 28. The Army dropped it down to 10. It's like, dude, can you imagine? Like, first they dropped it so you didn't have to have a high school education. That went really wrong, so they reversed it. But then they dropped the ASVAB score down to 10. Like, 28 is already like your mental is just, you're not really that capable of functioning minor tasks and like following minor orders. You know what I mean? 10 is like, what's the point of even taking the ASVAB? Like, if you consider the top score is 100 or 99 or whatever, 10. Imagine if you were in high school or in college and you took a test and you got a 10 out of 100, and that was passing. Like, who would want to be surrounded by people that where their life's on the line, or where the job that they do supports people who are putting their lives on the line directly? Where like you're counting on this back end support to be executed, and that person's ASVAB score was a 10. Like, can you really count on that? Is that really what we where we're going? Like, I just don't get it. You know what I mean? Again, they've had the worst recruiting numbers in like almost ever. Military retention's at an all-time low. They're like, oh well, we're not gonna. Or they said we're not gonna talk about, the fact that you get school and some other things that the VA can cover when they're out, because we want to focus on people that want to be in the service, like that their call to duty is stronger than just the monetary side of it. Because if it's for the monetary gain, then we think that there's better things they could do. This isn't about monetary. This is about duty. And it's like, if you guys are paying attention to what people have been saying for the last few years, especially people in the military, or people that have spent a considerable amount of time in the military, who've gotten out and are like, hey, like, this isn't okay. no one likes this, no one wants this, why not just move along those lines? And instead of, again, it seems like they tried to make a correction, right? They came out with these super woke commercials, like I would say almost overly inclusive, right? Because the military is not about being inclusive. It's not about being a fucking individual, right? Like when I was in the Marine Corps, like you were taught that everyone's just a different shade of green. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what culture you are. It doesn't matter what you believe in. None of that shit fucking matters. What matters is the mission. You put the mission first. Like that's it. But now that they've started putting the individual first, which is again something that you're supposed to basically like lose when you go through boot camp, you're supposed to get torn down, and built back up into like a military service member, right? You become like in the Marine Corps at least, esprit de corps, like you become a Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Like you're just a Marine. You're no longer the person you were, right? Which is maybe some people are like, oh well, that's too harsh or do whatever. Like that's what built the finest grading force in the fucking world. It wasn't having guys or girls come into the Marine Corps and being like, oh, well, like, I can't be here without talking to my mommy for 3 months. I need my cell phones on the weekends. Like, the fuck? Are you going to take your fucking cell phone to somewhere in the Middle East or into, God forbid, some other fucking, like, European country because we're at World War III again? You know what I mean? Like, let's be real. Like, if you can't survive boot camp emotionally for 3 months without a phone call to your mommy or without tough PT standards or what, like, how do you expect to keep a hardened military, especially when you don't have war to challenge them going on right now? We're in a peacetime military right now, right? The standards need to go up, not down. Right, the standards needs to go up. We need to make sure that the people that are in are like extremely dedicated, and this is what they want, and they're not soft, and they're not going to be battle hardened. So they need to be physically tough, mentally tough. They need to have all the things that can at least best prepare them to see combat for when the time comes, or to support combat when the time comes. But if you lower the standards, then you're just going into war with sheep. You're just going into war with people who have been given a handout just to join the military. Getting into the military is not even that hard. The standards were not that crazy, So again, and I know we've harped on this a lot already this year, but this is just ridiculous. And the fact that, and again, I think it's hilarious that they think that they're going to add 5,000 recruits to that recruiting number for the Army when they were short 15 last year. They're going to be short, if they were short 15 last year, they're going to be short 20 this year, if not more. Because no one wants to join the military. Nobody wants to go someplace where they're going to be given, when they're going to be forced to take experimental drugs, where they're going to be kicked out for following what I would almost consider unlawful orders, or not orders that at least aren't in your best interest. And now, again, I know that's a little wishy-washy because I would say most orders probably aren't in your best interest. But, because it's about the mission, not you. But again, they don't want to go in and just be dealing with mentally unstable people or people who couldn't even get through high school or whatever. You know what I mean? It's insane. It's insane. I'm not going to go too much further on this just because we're kind of beating a dead horse at this point, but I really want you guys to and it's okay. I'll be one of the first ones to say it. If I was going to tell someone to join the military now, I would probably say, don't do it. Not right now. Not until they get their head out of their ass. Not until they figure out what they're doing. Not until they clean up what's going on. Because again, I've got guys that I know that were booted out of the military for not following certain protocol orders, and I've got tons of dudes who are in now that are just who I served with who still happen to be in. And they're like, man, the military now is not anything like what we were what it was when we were in. It is just this woke driven, everyone's feelings matter more than the mission nonsense. And they're all looking at getting out. Even guys that are like close to retiring, you know, they're like, man, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm not proud. I don't like, you know, and it's hard to see that. Cause it's like, man, like when I was in, like, it was starting to change. We started seeing some of the changes. For example, like at least I'm just talking from the Marine Corps side because that's where I come from. But, you know, even the boot camp requirements like got degraded while I was in, you know, like they just become slowly more and more soft, and they're just lowering the standards. And it's like, man, you can't do that. It's better to drop more people and get the finest that are out there than it is to lower the standards. I mean, if you're gonna lower the standards, you might as well just fucking start a mandatory service for everyone. Do your 2 years, you know, like Israel or other places, you know, or do a draft. I mean, again, at 10 on the ASVAB, again, you might as well do a draft. I mean, if you're hurting that bad, just say, well, look, we're taking some people, you know, like, you know, and the thing is, again, they're having this recruiting issue because they've allowed for our society to look down on the military for way too long, right? There's a large portion of our community and our societies in our culture here in the U.S. that like does not appreciate or respect the military or the members or prior service veterans. Like they just don't care. You know what I mean? Or they look at them as if they're like, you know, that you'll hear the, oh, you're a baby killer. Oh, you're just, or you have the complete opposite end of it. And they're kind of like, I wouldn't say they're on the side of the military, but they'll be like, oh, like you're just a pawn to line the pockets of the rich or whatever. And it's like, clearly those people don't entirely understand everything that happens overseas. But that's because also our media doesn't ever cover the good stuff. You know what I mean? Like back in World War I, World War II, some of the earlier wars, like the media covered everything. Yes, you had the bad stories, but they also covered the good that was done, right? The benefits that come from war, right? And even if us, our own Americans here aren't like if we're going to play the world's 911 force, for example, right? Like when we were in Afghanistan, right? And we did good there for those people, right? There was like Taliban controlled markets where we kind of freed that market and that town from like that tyrannical rule of the Taliban, so that they didn't have to they'd be taxed by the Taliban every time they went in and out of the market, and they were really thankful for that. You know what I mean? But it's small stories like that, like the U.S. people don't ever hear. They don't hear about that shit. They don't, and the media will never cover it. You know what I mean? They don't share any of the positivity that comes out of it. All you hear is about the negative shit, right? And the other part is you also don't hear about unless there's like a large portion that die all at once, you don't hear about the deaths, right? But realistically, like our men and women in service should be everything to this country. Everything. There shouldn't be anything that they're not given, especially as they come out. Like you signed on the dotted line. No one else has done that, especially during a time of war or post-war when we're looming on war again. You know, so I'm gonna stop beating this dead horse. I just wanted to cover it again because they're talking about it again, and I saw them kind of like tweak their narrative back to like going back to their old motto, trying to like kind of because they realized the whole woke agenda commercials weren't really that great and didn't really work at all. No shit, go figure. But we'll see, because it seems like they're taking a step backward a little bit to get back to where they were. But is the rest of it going to follow? Right? Are they going to start realizing that weak standards and weak individuals don't make a good military? So with that said, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you guys so much for just being part of this channel, being part of the community. I'm super excited about everything we have going on right now. Look out for the Thinking Out Live podcast later this week on Thursday, and I will see you guys then. And next week's Tactical Tuesday. Have an awesome rest of your week. Again, I'll see you on the Thinking Out Live podcast. As always, stay loose, battle on, and if you have bitch in your heart, it'll show.